Okay, besides that, what is it in God's character that makes it possible?
Unity.
Unity.
Love, obviously.
Love. Why love? How is it possible for us to know love if we know God? Because in other religions there's also a God.
And there's also love. And there's also love in our other religions, believe it or not.
But why is our God different when it comes to love?
Is it right?
This is the love of truth. For me, that's why.
It says in the beginning God, okay? But in verse 26 it says let us.
No, it's a unity. It's a unity.
I want to come back to that. Because it's the Trinity that makes it possible. The Father loves the Son loves the Spirit loves the Father. So that love exists already within God.
That's interesting.
That's why love is possible. Otherwise God can't say He loves me, because how would He know what love is?
I never thought of it that way.
You understand? How would He know what love is? But that's also where we find community. If you look at heaven, it says, let us. Whenever they describe heaven, there's the angels, there's the courts, and whatever. So God, in that sense, is not alone.
Yeah. It makes sense. I mean,
Yes, it does say in the beginning, God.
Yes.
So we understand it to be, but He's community from the beginning.
Yes, He is more than one. I mean,
So, it does belong to God, and I want you to remember that it does not belong to the church. The church simply created an order or a formula by which they come and they bless you. But that does not make marriage not blessed if it's not done in a church, does it? Why not? Go back to your first answer. Because it's God's.
Yeah.
Even if it's like for a Muslim and a
It's still
Hindu
blessed
and
because God instituted marriage.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve didn't divorce after the fall.
No.
There was a curse upon the sinful.
I don't think they had a married daddy either. They were just creating that together. Here we go, here's something for you. Need help.
stupid.
Yeah.
Serious business.
So, there's this capacity to love, there's the unity of God, and out of that we find community, we find the capacity to love, because He creates us in His image.
Sure.
And if He creates us in His image, then we have certain capacities that He owns. And one of them is to be social. And out of that is born the marriage. Marriage, which is the most intimate relationship that you can possibly find. I've had friends over the years, but it's not the same. I've had one girlfriend for 1 week, but it's not the same. Well, not that you can compare it. But yeah, I've had a load of friends, I've been in love and so forth. And I've had some really close friends. But the bond in marriage is something else. Something very, very different. So it says, and we're back to Weldon Viertel. But this time his wife helped him to write the book. God plotted divine design for the whole in the natures of man and woman when He created them, social creatures, incomplete and unfulfilled. And therefore He says, it's not good for man to be alone. Because if you see the courts of heaven, then He was never alone. But even if you took the angels away, He was never alone, because He was community. God was three. God is one. God is three, not was three. So there's a need for physical companionship and reproduction. Is an integral part of human nature. Of all the social institutions that we can find, the place of learning, and the most distinctive one of them is the home. You have the church, you have the school, you have the state. But nowadays, the state is held accountable for teaching children. Even their upbringing, telling us how to run our homes. It is okay for them to say that yes, I cannot abuse my child, and then to write a law to protect the child. I have no problem with that. However, they've decided that they will take it one step further and say to me that I may not raise my hand
Discipline your child.
to discipline my child in a way that I find suitable for him. Now, suitable needs to be defined, obviously. And suitable needs to exclude the option of abuse, where it goes beyond what we call it. Now, Genesis, you have 2 creation accounts. Chapter 1. Remember when we did Old Testament? What did they say was chapter 1? How God stands in relation to His created order. Chapter 2, how man stands in relationship to the material creation and to his Creator. That's in a nutshell. And then what happens is, there's divine consultation, even before man is created. Very important to note, the plural us and our is not polytheism. But in other words, there's more than one God. More than one distinct God. In our case, the Father and the Son is one. But the use reflects a deep biblical insight into the greatness of God's nature. The same emphasis is given by the use of the plural form of the word God, Elohim instead of El. And they're very important. God is so great that He must be understood as a society of love, even though He is one. There they give they tell you how the biblical writers conceive and express the richly personal and societal nature of God, and they give the imagery of heaven. He's surrounded by angels, ministering spirits, sons of God. Made in His image, therefore a social being. Man means mankind, therefore man created in God's image means humanity, which includes both male and female. That's why He can say to Cain, who killed Abel, where is your brother? And then he has the audacity to ask, am I my brother's keeper?
Yep.
Both male and female in social relations constitute the image of God. You understand, you come back to the issue of unity. Male and female in social relations constitute the image of God. He did not want him to be alone. Male and female approximate the image of God as created in the act of procreation. Wow. Because now, like their God, they are also busy creating and bringing forth. Image simply means an actual duplication, and the emphasis is on the material resemblance. Likeness is more abstract and emphasizes a spiritual resemblance. So it's both of them. They are used as synonyms, but they're not necessarily the same. So how are we made up? Intelligence, will, moral responsibility, and social and religious communion. That is all that we've been given. That is the capacity that we've been given as human beings. And that is why we are able to communicate with God. Or He is able to communicate with us. If you think of the Trinity, if you take the Spirit away, how else is He supposed to be able to communicate with us? How? Because the Spirit dwells me. And the Spirit man can only understand the spiritual things, the elements. So the Spirit is necessary. Man in his image of God was given control over the animals, even as God has control over all created things, including man. Okay, so Genesis 2:7 says that we were formed from the dust and made a living being or soul, even as he did other animals. The same Hebrew word for living creatures is used in 2:19. We are created from matter, therefore related on the physical level to the rest of material creation. Plant and animal creation can provide for man's physical needs, but it cannot provide for his social and spiritual needs, because it clearly says, into us he blew his ruach. So this distinction is made on that level. His nature rises above the physical, for we are spirit beings, first of all. We are not physical beings. The first thing we are spirit beings. A social being with humanity cannot be realized apart from other beings of his own kind. It's impossible to literally live on an island. Take a man out of society, put him among animals and see what you'll get. Tarzan, they call him. Genesis 2:19-20, man names the other species. So look at the level he's at already. Yet he could not relate to them on a physical and spiritual level. So man is incomplete without woman and cannot fulfill every aspect of his nature apart from that. One of his divinely appointed purposes is procreation. It allows a man and woman to share with God in the process of creation. Joint participation reveals that complete humanity requires the unity of man and woman. So we go back to the concept of unity. This truth is evident in Adam's response to Eve's creation. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. The tendency, that is why most men seem to be growing up a little later, because the emphasis is on the individualism. We're more prone to worry about our own needs and enjoying ourselves and enjoying life than actually looking at what God has offered us. We're more prone to be instinctive rather than spiritual. We act like animals sometimes, wanting to satisfy the physical needs all the time. Because we are not told who we are. If you look at the world around you, it advertises a physical being. Look at any of the ads, that's the first thing it advertises. It doesn't advertise the spiritual part of man. It never does that. Or at least it seldom does that, if ever. So human beings cannot experience personality and full humanity apart from other beings. It's impossible. If you just think of the story of the Good Samaritan, two passing by, that is less than human. That is very impersonal for them to do that or to operate on that level. Human characteristics such as intelligence, love, hatred, selfishness, and concern cannot be expressed without other social beings. They are very much a part of a person's total being. That is why when you have these guys, I can't get his name now. Your apologists that have these great arguments, one of them is passed on now.
Oh, Ravi.
No, Ravi's still around.
Yeah, no, but the other guy.
He's one of the best around still.
Yeah.
I can't get to the other guy's name.
The guy that passed away. Nabil.
Yeah, there's quite a few that was there.
I think the one that passed away was Nabil, wasn't it?
And this was one of the questions to the atheist. Explain love to me. And he couldn't. Because according to their way of explaining it, They can simply call it a state of mind, but what exactly is that?
So what is a state of mind?
Okay, he emphasized that humanity was designed for societal relations, different levels, but the most intimate are experienced within the home, husband and wife, parent and children. The right kind of homes are required for the development of healthy children. Complete humanity is emphasized on one of Adam's ribs. Then in 23 of chapter 2, there's the physical individuality. There's the closest possible relationship and unity between man and woman. Okay, I should be opening up my Bible while I'm doing this. Oops, I got the map on. Yeah. 23 is this last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Then in verse 24a, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother. Man receives physical life from his parents, so he can only leave them if they made him. Yet he looks to his wife for the fulfillment of his humanity. Superiority, very important, has no theological base. Not for male, neither for female. There is an order to things though, but there's no such thing as superiority. The New Testament might call you the head of the home, but it also says at the same time that you will love your wife as Christ loved the church. Now imagine that. Because the Bible doesn't even use the word love when they speak of woman. They say that the wife must respect us. Maybe it's just another way of loving, another form of expression of love. But it seems that that which is placed on us is even heavier. So in the order of things, if you think you're superior, it's going to think about the grafting that you're going to have to do to give expression to your part of the command. So that's why you go back to the verses that precede that passage, which says, be subject one to another. If you are saved and your wife is saved, her spirit is not a junior spirit. Isn't. She has the Spirit of God like you. She has capacity like you. Yeah, we will not deal with the women's liberation movement tonight. I want to deal with it later, but I want to look at a little assignment for you. The order of Genesis now sets forth the physical design of man and woman, the unique social and physical characteristics in Genesis 2:24b. Cleave means glue to. That is, the two becomes one person. And there also it clearly says to you, they shall become one flesh, implied that the sexual experience is for those who enter into marriage. Because often it is said, but it doesn't explicitly say so. So what? If it's implied because that's what happens in law. That which is implied is as good as it is written. So,
Brendan was asking me questions now about my faith. He actually tackled that one. So what is sexual immorality?
what's the other?
Because he's got a girlfriend, but it's...
Yeah, they use the word fornication. You need to go back and go look at the word fornication rather than sexual immorality.
Yes, there's a difference between the two.
Yes.
Now, and that's what I explained to you.
That is why it's important for me. Some of the changes that we've made to the Bible text does not help when explaining some of these issues.
These issues, yeah.
Because sexual immorality and fornication is not necessarily the same
No,
word or gives off the same meaning.
Yeah.
They use that simply because it's called what we call dynamic equivalence. So it's more put into a context, and now it's given a form to speak to that context. But the context may change, so dynamic equivalence may lag in that particular area. Or you get the word-for-word translation, which also has its pros and cons. But the dynamic equivalence might fall flat there, because now he's sitting with that problem, because sexual immorality and fornication is not the same thing.
Not the same thing. Yeah.
So it would be wise then to use a Bible which uses the word fornication when you're explaining it to them, then give them the actual meaning.
Yeah, because the interesting thing is he also brought up culture today. He says, culture today is not the same way. I could just go grab a wife and... So I've been with a girl for a while, and obviously they're sleeping together.
But it's not marriage. They don't.
It's not marriage.
Do they? Because when people live together in one counseling, then I ask, how do you introduce your partner?
Yeah.
If you're saying to me she's just a partner, then I ask, what does that mean? Define it for me. My other question is, can you work out when you want to? Explain your commitment to me. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to her? Because now the two, suddenly when you ask those questions, you find that they are so far apart from one another. Because what he wants and what he thinks, she thinks is not the same thing. Then suddenly you find out that they're thinking very differently about the same terms. And the lines that they draw is just very different.
No, it was an interesting question that he asked. It was a very interesting question.
In that case, is that for
being Christian
or...
I'm talking about people who simply live
That's the
together.
question you asked.
Oh, people live together.
Oh, really?
In that case, that's brought up. Is that only for Christian community or it's just everybody?
Look, it can apply to everybody. That is correct. However, when he raised that, he was talking about a couple that was just living together, not married.
Yeah.
But I would ask the same questions to a married couple, because if they don't understand the word, they might also have very different definitions about different things in the word. And their understanding of covenant relationship might be very different. The one might not be as serious as the other. So it would be wise to ask those type of questions to find out exactly where they are in terms of their thinking on certain matters. It might just be a developmental issue in terms of where they are in their lives. So it might not necessarily be a problem. It might be something else in terms of developmental stages in their life. So you look at different issues there. As the two become one is implied in 1 Corinthians 6:15-16. Okay? God has designed male and female bodies to join together as one flesh. It's like when I was at university the first year and we studied anthropology. This is one of the issues that came up. And one of the guys who was not a Christian simply looked at the lecture and said, listen man, does it look like my body was designed for another man? Do you think it was? Because you're asking us questions, so I'm asking you now, does it look to you like my body was designed for you? Just from a very physical point of view.
Yeah.
So I'm not making any theological arguments, God is not in question.
I generally make those arguments with people on basic, strictly on science.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily always have to bring God into certain types of arguments. And you can actually win the battle and then take them on to the next level. The unity of marriage partners, 1 Corinthians 6:18. I need to bring my Bible rather next time. It works better. 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Why? Because the two of them never became one flesh. So that's the implication. He did not leave home to take her to himself so that they may become one. Because if he did that, and that was his thinking, then in his mind and in his understanding of things, he would be committing to her for life. Whether it's in the court of law or whether it's in front of the pulpit, he would be committing to her, and she would be committing to him.
Yeah, auditory.
Adultery is one half of the one flesh of marriage, partner sinning against the other half. In today's society, it's the issue.
Dis hier moet ek weer fokus.
You see, in the introduction, there's three important questions. If marriage is ordained by God, the home and the church must assume primary responsibility. Now there's certain questions that comes out of this thing, because often we keep the church and the school responsible for preparing young people for marriage. All three of them can play a role, home, school, and yes. But the primary responsibility belongs to the home, and then secondly to the church, because the church teaches the word. It's supposed to be taught by your father and your mother at home. But Viertel says high divorce rate signals inadequate prep for marriage. And so the question is, will adequate prep for marriage reduce divorce? Will it really?
You know what? I don't know.
The home, is it perhaps because most parents are unaware what needs to be done? You know, how to prepare us? Because maybe they don't. And that's why my friend is now focusing on that area. To say to parents, this is what a home is supposed to look like. This is how God ordained it and purposed it. This is its purposes. This is its responsibilities. This is its design. This is how it's supposed to look like. So we can teach them that, then they can teach the children this is what it's supposed to look like. The church is here to prepare individuals for life or for marriage. Does the church make a real effort to prepare people for life? In this case, for marriage. Back to the church again. Have pastors skilled themselves for premarital counseling? Because often we're caught in situations where we are asked to counsel people and we're not really ready to counsel them because we don't know what it's supposed to look like. We don't know how to deal with the issues that come before us nowadays with people living together. The law says after 6 months they are married.
Yeah.
If they're living together after 6 months, they're
Yes,
married.
they are married.
Yeah.
So by law they are married.
They are married.
And therefore,
It's only 3 years.
it's an important question when you're asking couples how long have they been staying together, then to perhaps say to them, do you understand that the law now regards you as married? And does this person may make certain claims on you?
Yeah.
You must ask those questions in the counseling session. Because they must understand what they got themselves into by virtue of the law. Because people think they can do as they please. There's no such thing as freedom. Freedom has its limitations.
Yep.
Your right may infringe on another person's right, and therefore your right may never take precedence. Marriages are not automatically successful, guys. It's work, 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 work. Did I song? Describe my song? Work, work, work.
Yeah.
Okay, now nobody knows. As it never, nobody listens, okay. Yeah, some people walk into it with fantasies instead of the reality of life because they've never seen the real thing, they've never been exposed to the real thing, so they try and figure it out and they have this fantasy about marriage. And that's what they go into. That's how they go into the marriage. This fantasy. It's supposed to look like this.
Well, the fantasy is always
Yes.
better than the real thing.
The problem is there's no experience in making marital adjustments and in solving conflicts. In preparation for marriage, young people should have a correct view of God's purpose and plan and purpose for the home. And that we find in lesson 1. There's the psychological preparation. They need to understand the realistic and enduring purposes of marriage. There's the mutual benefits required, giving on the part of both. Paul says your body is not your own. That's how he explains it. So I'm not referring only to the sexual part now. Your body is no longer your own. If it says you will love your life, you will love your wife the way Christ loved the church. If it says no man is a friend like this who lay down his life, then that's the type of love. And now I'm really burdening you, aren't I?
Yeah, there is also something that's right there where it says that you shall love your wife, husband, love your wife.
Yes.
There's another sermon I was listening to it, and I went to say, oh, this guy is talking a hard thing by saying that, listen, if you don't love your wife, you do something wrong, you're not obeying God.
That's right. You're not obeying.
So you are doing, you are sinning against God.
Yes.
Whatever you are doing in life, and then once you just don't love your wife, you don't do right to your wife, just put in mind that I'm not obeying God, I'm sinning against God.
Your first
What to do with
your relationship with God takes precedence.
Yeah.
It's the first thing that you have to manage properly.
Yeah. Because there were 2 commandments that they are for husband and for wife. So for husband is to love.
Jesus also says, you are my friends if you obey my commands.
Obey my commands. Which is command.
Marriage should provide an intimate and affectionate companionship. Marriage partners complement one another in meeting personal, physical, and psychological needs. Marriage should provide for the needs of the physical impulses of both. Mel and I'm giving a really stupid example now, but don't think of it as that, because you might get this one day in your relationships. Mel and I were going through a very difficult time the last couple of years. There wasn't a lot of money always. And one day, I brought money home from a job that I just done. And she said to me, I would like some fish and chips. And I'm thinking as a man, but there's not enough money for fish and chips. I'm thinking like a man. And my wife loses it with me. And she's really angry, Owens. She's angry. No, don't get more fish and chips. That doesn't make sense. You're angry me over fish and chips. In any case, I'm thinking like a man. So I call a pastor friend of mine, and he listens up to my story, and he says to me, go buy her the fish and chips. Goodbye.
That was the good advice.
Sure. It was the best advice that I could get.
Well,
Go and buy it, then that's it.
Immediately there's peace.
There is peace. For 40 years he was Yes.
Well, you remind me of a guy who was at our clinic, it was earlier this year. So they are married for like in 65 years. And I asked him the recipe for being married for so long. He told me, compromise. And not from other side, he said,
Yes.
from my side.
You're not necessarily always compromising on God's laws. I don't think he meant that. There's the impulsive behavior of both sometimes. There's that it's not abnormal for us to act out like that. It's abnormal when it becomes sinful, when it infringes upon the next person. I'm trying to think of an example now. But that was the best way I could explain that one to you. The fish and chips saved my day. Marriage is more than romantic love, guys. More than romantic. Sexual impulse is not evil, but given to man for the purpose of and companionship. So your sexual impulse is not evil. Sex within marriage is wholesome and holy. The birth of children and their presence in the home satisfy a deep desire in the hearts of most adults. Marriage should add to the happiness, fulfillment, and development of each other. It's permanent. This is a lifetime process, guys. And there's going to be lots of choices you're going to have to make and lots of adjustments. That's why prior to marriage, that is what you need to be taught. How to make solid choices and how to make adjustments once those choices are made. So that by the time the marriage comes, you've got practiced. You practiced. How does the sermon come? Through practice. Go to Hebrews, go and read Hebrews. It will tell you it comes by practice. Discernment comes by experience. We always think of discernment in terms of the Spirit giving us discernment. Discernment also comes through years of experience.
No, that's true.
So practice, practice, practice. Practice now to make the hard choices, to put things in order, in a logical order, to say this is not important, that is important. That can wait. That is an adjustment you're making. So by the way, so teach yourself. So that when you get to the marriage and difficult choices are having to be made, and you are not the most important frog in the pond at that moment, and you have to make the adjustment, then you have practiced for that moment. You understand? Because a mature person is able to look at the framework, at the picture, see the whole framework, and say to himself, let me step back here. Maybe I'm not the most important here. Maybe there's other things at play here, and I need to get that in order. I need to step back, and I need to be a little bit unselfish here. I have the saying to my wife. She says, you're irritating me. I say, no, I'm not irritating you. You are irritable. Yeah, don't learn my lines, please.
I remember. Yeah.
Emphasis on negative characteristics, whether in a marriage or outside of a marriage. You know what that does? So practice now, not to focus on the negative of people. Look for the good in others. Learn how to look for the good in others. Teach yourself. Prepare yourself for marriage. You see, those who know that it's permanent will rather accentuate the positive, says Viertel. They will understand that each has undesirable characteristics, because we noticed that only after 7 months of marriage or so. Instead of understanding them before the time and being able to make that hard choice and saying, listen, this is my likes and dislikes about her. Can we make it? Yes or no? Do I want this? Yes or no? So I know that is not what I'm going to get from her perhaps. But I still want her. So I'm going to have to live with it, and I'm going to have to make adjustments. You see how you need to reason that thing out, and you need to be careful. Because prior to marriage, you saw it coming, and you still said yes. Now you're in the marriage and you say, what is this? As if it's new. No, it's not new. You saw it. You just didn't want to take notice of it. Because you were in love, and love is apparently blind. No. We are adults. We see things. We notice things.
Love ain't blind. Love ain't blind, man.
Yeah, the Greek language is distinguished between 3 kinds of love, which is the eros, the philia, and agape love. And the eros focuses on physical attraction, and that happens to most of us. The first that we see a girl, more than often than not, it's not something that she's busy doing that we like. It's because we like what we see.
Yeah.
And then we see afterwards what she's busy with, and we like that too.
Yeah.
But
we don't.
Yeah, as if that is an addendum, which should not be the case, it should be the reverse.
Yeah.
Philia speaks of the mutual concern and consideration for friends. Agape refers to one's concern for the other person. I lay down my life. Love her like Christ loved the church. Concern for the other person. A successful marriage relationship involves all three of them. There will be erotic love. There will be physical attraction. There will be mutual consideration. There will be friendship within the marriage. And hopefully you two will be each other's best friends. And that is what you will work towards. You will be each other's best friends. She must not find a best friend outside of your marriage. Because she might want to have the eros with him or her too. When she leaves and try and find a best friend somewhere else. And then the agape will not be of a concern to her at all, nor you. And the other way as well. Well, I'm speaking to men, so that is why my words are the way it is. Alright? It's not necessarily that I will reverse it if there was both parties sitting, but I'm speaking to men. There is an act of will or commitment to each other and concern expressed in deeds. Marital love also includes an attitude of cooperation. Persons who have emotional disturbances have difficulty developing healthy relationships. Healthy love. Which have what we call inferior feelings or insecurity. Self-acceptance. That is why it says, love yourself as you love. You first have to love yourself, so by the way, before you will know how to love somebody else. Because if you don't know how to take care of yourself, you can't take care of somebody else. So there has to be self-acceptance and a healthy regard for oneself. And that enables you to respond more readily to others. With acceptance, respect and trust. If you have an inferior, feelings or insecurities, you're going to, what is the word that they use? You're going to redirect them. You're going to impose them on the other person. And this part is very important here, guys. Remember this section. Achieving emotional maturity. He says indications of maturity is the following. It is the ability to deny immediate desires for future achievements. I sat with a couple now the other day.
Say again? That's to deny?
Ability to deny immediate desires for future achievements. There's the ability to analyze situations objectively. There's the ability to see things in a true relationship and be impartial in evaluation. There's the ability to have a philosophy which guides in life and to which all activities can be related. And that philosophy is the fact that we are social beings, and we are social beings created in God's image. God purposed for us not to be alone. He purposed the marriage, He planned it, He designed the home. So you need to understand and grasp those things completely and fully. So you need to have that type of philosophy and develop that type of philosophy, because that is what it's going to be hinging on. Now it could be questioned during that time, and you could be wrong about certain things, so you might have to rewrite that philosophy if it's a wrong one. But that's all part of the process, that's all part of the adjustment as you go along. Therefore, one's choice of a marriage partner is not based upon physical attraction, but upon compatibility. For most reasons why people divorce, isn't it? We're not compatible, they say. Yeah. Some people divorce after 30, 35 years, 40 years.
After 30 years, not being compatible.
Amazing, isn't it? Look for common interests, a common philosophy, and similar goals in life. I'm just going to go till here, and then I'm going to give you the rest. You can read for yourself, and then I'm going to give you a little assignment. A person's psychological makeup may be partially the result of early environment and unhappy experiences. But his nature, patterned after God's image, guarantees that he's not altogether a victim of circumstances. I'll read that again. A person's psychological makeup may be partially the result of early environment and unhappy experiences. But your nature is patterned after God's image, and that is what you need to claim for yourself. You are patterned after God's image. And then go to His Word and go and learn about that nature, that new nature of yours, and what it should look like. So that it may be patterned after, so that you may be made in the, so that you will grow in the grace and knowledge of, so that you may look like Him.
Yeah. So it all starts there.
So whatever happened in the past can be dealt with. The thinking needs to be changed. It needs to be renewed.
That's the renewal of the mind.
It needs to be renewed, because there was an early environment that was supposed to be conducive and teach you certain things about life, and it didn't. There was unhappy experiences that might have changed your thinking with regards to just the concept of marriage. Now it needs to change. It needs to be renewed, and that's what you need to do. You need to go and sit in the Word and discover what that is. Patterned after God's image guarantees that he's not altogether a victim of circumstances. My wife grew up with a single mother too, and she's not so maladjusted as people think she is, because she made certain choices. I know of a certain guy who lived in absolute poverty, lived in the same room, while his father was laying with another woman in the same room while his mother was there too. He used to close his head at night when he heard all of this. Today, he's a doctor in mathematics. You understand? He saw it and he said, but I don't desire this because it's not supposed to look like this.
Yes, yeah. No, I'm with you on that, yeah.
So some see, some have the ability to see while others remain blind. Anxiety alleviated by forgiveness, and forgiveness is a key thing in marriage. Learn to forgive not only your partner but yourself when you make mistakes. And the removal of guilt. There's insecurity which is solved only by faith, in which one's life is grounded in the power of the Creator. There's self-centeredness and lovelessness, which is only cured by inviting Christ to abide within and to control one's life. The most successful marriages are those in which each partner has committed his life to Christ. And it is wise for a person to marry in the Lord and to give attention to the development of spiritual characteristics in order to achieve happiness in marriage. I'm going to end it here. The rest you can read for yourself. Now, listen to the assignment.
Okay.
Because part of the answer you might find in the